Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
My name is Susan Hamilton. I am a multi-genre author. I have 3 novels out at the moment. 2 are more in the dark urban fantasy genre, but the one we're going to be talking about today is Stoneheart, my newest offering, which is actually a departure for me. It's women's fiction. So I kind of went beyond the pale in what my comfort zone was on this one, but it was the story that really was stuck in my head. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it got. So I figured, well, this is clearly the story I need to write. It is women's fiction. It has a high dose of romance in it, but it's not a romance novel per se. I would say it'll appeal to readers who really like realistic characters who are struggling with genuine issues, fans of romance novels that are less about maybe a perfect hero than how messy life truly is, and people who enjoy stories that really kind of hit on all the reader's emotions. I do have in the book, there are 2 characters who do have an extramarital affair. So I have found that has been quite a lightning rod for some readers, as you can imagine. But I thought we would get started today. I would read a chapter to get everyone started. And the main character who gets introduced in the first chapter is Lauren Stone. She is the lead singer in a band called the Kingmakers. And at the moment, she is contemplating recording their new album because that is going to be recorded back in New York, where she grew up. All righty. Chapter 1. Lauren Stone owned a big-ass beachfront Spanish colonial revival in Santa Monica, California. With 6 bedrooms, 5 baths, and a pool that overlooked the sand, it was far too big for her, and when she bought it, people had clucked at her excess. Lauren, however, didn't give a rat's backside what they thought. She knew the adage was true. Money couldn't buy happiness. It could, however, buy some very awesome toys. Years ago, she'd promised herself that if her band, the Kingmakers, ever made it big, she was buying herself a big house with a view of the ocean, and Lauren Stone kept her promises. She was sitting in a spacious, airy sunroom where an overstuffed sofa and several chairs formed a rough semicircle around a long coffee table that faced a bank of windows and the arched glass doors that led out to the pool. Exposed dark mahogany beams ran the length of the stucco ceiling, while 2 ceiling fans provided a soothing breeze. Aside from the ocean view, this room was one of the things that had sold her on this house. She got out of the plush chair and leaned in the arched doorway that opened to her patio and pool. Taking a deep drink of beer, she contemplated the expanse of sand beyond the fence, stretching from the edge of her backyard to the cerulean water. She liked how the color changed depending on the day and the weather. At the sound of footsteps, she looked back into the room. "Hey, Augie." "Hey," her cousin's dimples deepened when he smiled. Lauren grew up with 3 sisters, and Augustus Augie Stone was the brother she never had. A year younger than her, he was the Kingmakers drummer. "Connie let you in?" She'd let her housekeeper know that she was expecting company. "Yeah, said you'd be out here." Augie leaned his athletic 6-foot frame on the other side of the curved doorway. Putting her beer bottle down, Lauren pulled her hair back and tugged the scrunchie off her wrist to capture it in a messy ponytail. It would have been the same dark brown of Augie's if she didn't get it highlighted, but they both shared a soft, natural wave that ran in the Stone family. For Lauren, that meant minimal time trying to curl it. For Augie, it just meant some unruly cowlicks. "Come on, too nice to be inside," she said. "Let's sit by the pool. There's more beer in the cooler. I've got that new Elkstone Amber I was telling you about. Lead on." Sheltered by a large red umbrella, the teak table was surrounded by 4 chairs. A few feet away, 2 padded lounge chairs waited. Augie flopped down in one, Lauren in the other. As soon as she got comfortable, her phone buzzed. She glanced and started to laugh. "Gonna share? Just DJ being DJ." Lauren snickered again. "What is it, 52 poop emojis in a row?" "Close." He threw in a few eggplants for good measure. She tucked the phone into a shady spot under the chair, and they fell into an amiable silence. Lauren took a deep breath and let it out slowly, trying to let her anxiety exit with it. "DJ's worried about you, you know." "I've been through breakups before." Lauren forced her voice to be light. She had been through breakups over the years, more than she cared to admit. And there were times she wondered if she was capable of a long-term relationship with anyone. Rob had been fun, but the charm hadn't lasted. Her ex, however, hadn't taken the breakup well. Well, if you want to talk, I don't. She took another drink of beer. Needy, manipulative little bastard. She thought about the salvo of nasty tweets Rob had flung at her like a monkey throwing his own excrement. It wasn't like she'd expected him to be happy about being shown the door, but the juvenile level of his response had been astonishing. I thought you didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about him. I do want to talk about the new album. And the last one was good, but not great. This one needs to be a home run. Worry painted her voice and she hated it. She drummed her fingers on the armrest. I'm not ready to fade into the sunset. We're not fading into anything, Augie said. Seriously, dude, you need to stop listening to the critics' podcasts. Lauren chewed her lip. Augie wasn't entirely wrong. The band had taken a well-earned break after the last tour, but it was time to get back to work. Restless, she got up and walked to the fence surrounding the pool. Leaning on it, she stared out towards the Pacific. Wispy clouds streaked the sky, slashes of rose and gold in the setting sun. A squeak told her Augie had gotten out of his chair. He leaned on the rail next to her and gave her hip a gentle bump. What's up? She shrugged. Nothing. Liar, liar, pants on fire. He flashed her a grin, dimples appearing in his cheeks again. You're a child, she said with an affectionate laugh. Like that surprises you? Come on, seriously. You've got that pensive look. What gives? She tried to equivocate. Usual brooding, creative type personality issues. The noise, not quite a snort, but not a coughed bullshit either, that her cousin made told her he didn't believe her. But he didn't ask any more questions. They stood in silence, admiring the sun as it sank towards the horizon. I haven't gotten as much writing done as I wanted, Lauren said, tired of the quiet. She hoped that would satisfy Augie and he wouldn't press for more. Truth be told, she was struggling with her songwriting, and the last thing she wanted to do was fess up to that. So, you'll hit your stride. Don't get hung up on it. I guess. She watched a bird soar and bank in the sky. It was too far away to tell what kind it was, but she admired its freewheeling flight. You know I'm right, and getting the chance to work with Fitz is going to be epic, Augie said. I know. I've wanted him to produce one of our albums for a long time. The mention of Fitz perked her up. Fitz McCallum was one of the most sought-after producers in the industry, and the band had jumped at the opportunity to work with him. He had a reputation for turning everything he worked on into gold, even better, platinum. And I'm glad we're going to New York for this, Augie said. Haven't seen the seasons change in a long time. Lauren cocked an eyebrow. $50 is the first chilly day. You're going to turn into a whiny little, don't hate me because I'm sensitive. Augie started to laugh. Lauren joined him, but the laugh faded to a sigh. You sure that's all that's bugging you? He asked. Nothing's bugging me. Lauren shifted her weight away as if that would let her avoid the question. She put her hand up to shield her eyes from the sun, and so she didn't have to make eye contact with Augie. Her thoughts churned. What if I've got no songs? What if the trades are right? What if I've lost my mojo? She felt the worry tighten around her chest, making it hard to take a breath. She changed the subject. The last thing she wanted to do was keep talking about her writing. I'm not telling my mom I'm coming back to New York until I'm getting on the plane, she said. She and Augie had grown up in the Bay Ridge area of Brooklyn. Augie turned towards her, a sly smile on his face. And you want me not to call my mom? If you do, your mom will call my mom, and all hell will break loose if she hears the grapevine that I'm back. Lauren watched her cousin weigh his options. What's in it for me? Are you blackmailing me? That's an ugly word, but call it what you want, sister. Augie leaned on one elbow on the fence and watched her with a self-satisfied smile. Lauren considered kicking him in the shin the same way she had when they were 6. I'll owe you big time. I love my family. She left the rest of the thought unfinished. No quality time with Jackie? Lauren gave Augie another look. Jackie was her older sister, and they were about as different as 2 siblings could be, more fire and gasoline than oil and water. Her younger sisters, Carolyn and Stephanie, were a different story. They adored Lauren, and Lauren adored them back. I love Jackie, but she makes me mental, Lauren said. I want our plans set, and I want to have a place to stay before they know I'm coming. Deal, Augie said. When we're home, I might look a few people up, indulge in some good old-fashioned reminiscing about our misspent youth. You're still in the middle of living your misspent youth. A couple of years, it's going to be your misspent middle ages. You first. Augie never skipped an opportunity to remind Lauren that she was a year older than he was. Out on the beach, people were wrapping up for the day, a stream of humanity leaving the white gold sand for the asphalt and concrete of LA. A young man in bright red trunks, maybe 20 years old, walked towards the distant parking lot, giving his girlfriend a piggyback ride. The wistful longing that bubbled up in Lauren's heart caught her off guard, bringing her back to a time when she was the one getting the piggyback. Danny, her heart stuttered. She'd never been able to stop thinking about Danny Padovano, her ex from high school. She'd struggled with their breakup for years as she tried every conceivable trick to get over him, including a cocaine addiction that nearly ruined her. Finally, Lauren buried her broken heart so deep that it was easy for her to pretend those feelings just didn't exist. She'd had other lovers over the years, but none of them had ever made her forget Danny. He was the one person who loved her for who she really was, not what she was, unlike Rob and all the other exes. She could feel Augie staring at her. Maybe I'll look Danny up while we're home. Pandora's box, he warned. It would be fine. Lauren set her jaw, refusing to meet his eyes or acknowledge the warning in his voice. She didn't want to argue, and she was well aware her cousin had never completely forgiven her ex for breaking her heart all those years ago. They turned their attention to other topics related to the band's temporary relocation. Augie had spoken briefly to Fitz, and the producer would be waiting for Lauren to call him. After about 20 minutes, Augie glanced at his watch. I got a bolt. You'll call Fitz to confirm the details? I will, she said. Catch you later. He sauntered away, and Lauren went back to watching the final moments of the sun's descent until it vanished, leaving the sky a blue-violet with the barest hint of maroon on the horizon. But the gorgeous color couldn't keep her thoughts from straying to her writing difficulties, and then to what Augie had said about looking up old friends. He'd stayed in touch with a few people over the years, but she hadn't. Not really. She'd had plenty of friends growing up, but none of them shared her passion for music, her obsession, as they called it. And once the Kingmakers took off, well, Lauren didn't have that much in common with them anymore. After nearly 20 years, Danny was the only person she was interested in seeing. The tangled prick of anger and longing in her heart annoyed her. Their breakup had been devastating, and although it had been years since she'd seen him, she thought about him often, more often than she probably should. Her sisters occasionally shared news about what he was up to. When Carolyn told her several years ago that Danny had gotten married, Lauren pretended it didn't bother her, but it did. She chewed her bottom lip and wondered if going back to New York might be a mistake.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. I have a dear and returning guest with us, the fabulous Miss Susan. Hello, madam. How are you?
I am very good. How are you today?
I am wonderful. I'm so happy you're joining us. Thrilled to have you here again. So we're going to jump in because this is a little different than what I'm used to having from you. So I'm going, what happened? Where did this story come from? Tell us.
Well, I had started this story probably 10 years ago, actually. I was having trouble focusing what I wanted to do for my next project. So I was just writing up some different ideas and things that might be interesting and scenes here and there that maybe I could transfer to another story. And I kind of came up with this idea of two people who had been separated for a long time, but still had never come to terms with all the emotions around their breakup. Because I think human beings are famous for being like, yeah, no, I'm fine. Not really.
No, you don't say. You do that? Never.
Yeah. So I explored that a little. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And it was a fun little exercise, and I put it away. And then I worked on my Shadow King novel and The Devil Inside novel and several short stories that went in anthologies. And then when all that was done, I was kind of like, well, now what do? I need to come up with something new to write. So I was dabbling and trying to think of some things. And I went through this old notebook I had with ideas and scraps and things. And I found this and I was like, oh, I remember that. I kind of liked that story. And I read through it and I was like, oh, I really like this, but it's not in the fantasy genre, which is kind of the lane I'm in. And I should really pick something there. This was an entertaining idea, but let's put it away. And I kept thinking about it. And it kept intruding when I was trying to write other things. And finally I said, well, clearly my brain wants me to work on this. So why don't I work on it for a little while, see what happens, see where it goes. And the next thing you know, I had a pretty substantial rough draft done of it. And I was like, okay. The really interesting thing was once I committed to it and I had the draft done and I wanted to send it to an editor, I sent it because I wanted somebody who had never seen it to look at it. And the first thing the editor said was, well, what genre is it? And I said, I don't really know. I said, it's got a lot of romance in it, but it doesn't feel like a romance novel to me. So I'm open to suggestions. And it was really an interesting conversation with her because we went back and forth a few times and we talked about some of the things that readers who are into the romance genre, and I'll be the first one to admit, I love a good romance novel now and then. It is a fun genre to read. It's just not something I normally write in. So some of the nuances of how it's structured hadn't really thought about because I just kind of dove into this without any pre-planning. And one thing she talked about was the kind of expectation that there'll be that happily ever after ending. And I'm not saying that my book doesn't have a happily ever after, but it doesn't quite fit into the mold of what probably a traditional romance novel person would expect. So we settled on promoting it as women's fiction, although I think it does fall under that kind of larger amorphous romantic fiction umbrella, because it does, the romance in it is a very important piece of the story, but the story itself is more about Lauren's journey through coming to terms with some of the mistakes she's made in the past, some of the decisions she's made that perhaps were not the best decisions that she could have ever made in her life, because we've all also done that. Love makes you do dumb things. And
that is a true one. True
yeah,
facts right there.
and Lauren is a shining example of that. It's the old adage, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and you mean well, and all of a sudden you're like, how did I get into this mess? Because this is not where I thought I would be.
Ooh, we all can relate to that. So I'm going to jump in because you have mentioned so many different things for our listeners who are going, typical romance tropes and the typical kind of structure is really key. Because if you're promoting a book as a romance, there is this expectation that,
yes,
they're together, they're going to meet, they're going to break up, but then they're going to get back together.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at those happily ever afters, happily ever after by yourself does not fit in a romance.
Yes.
That is a love story. It doesn't have to be a romance. So that's kind of,
Right.
I find that very interesting because you have to look at it very specifically,
Mm-hmm.
because it can be an amazing book. But if you promise your readers a romance and they didn't get that,
Yes,
they're going to destroy this book.
yes.
Let's be honest. They're not going to be happy at all.
Yes. And I learned a little bit when I was first starting to promote it, because I think subconsciously I talked about it a little more in romance terms. And I got some feedback from early readers that were like, one was even like, I didn't even finish it. And the reasons were just what we were talking about. And then another one who was lovely, she was like, I love this book. I cried. I got it. And I'm like, okay, well, I really hooked her in. And then she went on literally for 8 paragraphs to tell me everything she would have done differently in order to get it to the ending that she wanted. So I had to really take a step back and be like, all right, how am I talking about this book with people? And that's why I kind of opened when I read with saying it's less about perfect heroes than romance and how messy it can be.
This is very true to a woman's life, man's life. This is more into the love is messy category. So women's fiction falls really well.
Yes.
Because it's not going to lead you down the path that most typical romance readers are expecting. So for good, bad, or indifferent, let's be honest, if you tell somebody I have a comedy and you end up killing off everyone, they're not going to be happy.
Yes.
So those are for expectation purpose. And I think that's really exciting because you were planning to write in a different genre and this book just kind of kept coming. As a writer, sometimes you can't fight that. How long did you fight it? Let's be honest.
I probably fought it for about 6 months before I committed.
You were determined to stick to your way.
I was. And some of it for me was, you hear people talk in blogs and online and in articles you read about staying in your lane because that's what readers expect. And there is absolute value in that advice. But at the same time, I finally stopped and when I was like, I think my readers are smart enough to be like, okay, she's trying something different and not, she's totally abandoned us. It's like, she's trying something different And it might not be my cup of tea, and that's okay. Not everybody who likes my dark fantasy novels is going to like this, and vice versa. And that's all right. Everybody's got different taste.
I am definitely with you. I'm a multi-genre kind of girl. So you're no longer selling a genre, you're selling a brand. Love it.
Exactly.
See, I'm loving it. Are you looking for this to be a standalone book or you're thinking I'm going to go down this path some more?
I am actually about 20,000 words into a follow-up to it, which
Ooh.
is exciting and terrifying for me because I tend to really struggle with second books because I feel like there is an expectation that's been set by the first one. And all of a sudden I'm like, what if this one doesn't live up to that? And then I usually like find a different idea and I'm like, oh, well, I'll just go do this now. But this one, there are some things about Lauren and her story that are wrapped up to a certain extent at the end of Stoneheart, but are not fully answered. And I still had things in my brain about where I wanted her to go next. So with luck, we will have book 2. I don't know exactly when that will be. I was actually working on it a little this morning.
I am excited to hear it, especially because you're very much timid about it. I'm struggling with 2, but I'm still going to give it a chance. So I think
Mhm.
this is really exciting. We have talked previously about your writing journey. As you're switching genres, what has been something that has caught you off guard? Like, oh my God, I didn't expect this in this journey.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think probably the thing that's caught me the most off guard is, like I said before, figuring out how to talk about the new genre as its own independent work, represented accurately, but still kind of move myself, as you were saying, more to selling me as an author
Mhm.
versus just a couple of fantasy novels. And how do I talk about myself as a writer? Not sure I've 100% noodled through that yet, but I think that was the most surprising thing because all of a sudden it was like, how am I showing my face as a writer to everybody now that I've got these 2 facets to it?
It's very different. And sometimes it takes us a little time. I started from urban fantasy, and then I did a children's book. So I think automatically happened to have split my world. So I didn't have enough time to think about it. Like other people pointed it out to me. I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, you're not supposed to do that. What do you mean this should be? What? So it's something that we adjust, and you'd be surprised how quickly you will adjust as well. So it's kind of fun to see it. What have you learned in this process? Because I'm always curious to see the longer we're in this business and more we go in, oh, that's interesting. What has you learned writing from one genre to the other?
Well, one thing I've learned is that no matter what genre you're in, marketing your books can be hard and it can be a slog. I've learned a lot in Stoneheart about promoting it and trying to get readers to review it and things like that. Certainly some aspects that I hadn't looked at before, but I think I've learned also that there's value in the stories because sometimes you wonder, I think, as you're trying to branch into another genre, it's like, am I doing the right thing? Am I shooting myself in the foot? What if this is terrible? But you have to be brave enough. If you've got the story in your head, I think you need to write it. I've become more comfortable with that idea as I've gone through working in a new genre.
I like that. That is such a good message to give yourself that permission to be like, it's a little different, but I think I can do it.
Mhm.
On that same thing, what would you tell a new author who's thinking, huh, I want to try this?
I would say in general, I would have a couple things of advice is be kind to yourself is one. You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. You're going to have days where you look at the page and be like, I'm the worst writer ever. And it's okay to feel that way for a little bit, but you're not. You have to remember that, well, writing takes a long time. It's not one of these things where you just, and there's your book. You're going to go through a lot of different rounds. You're going to find stuff that, I mean, the very first book I ever wrote, I threw away the entire first draft of it, like 250 pages. I ripped it up because it was terrible. It was terrible, awful. And I started over. And sometimes you need to do that. Sometimes you need to be able to say, this is not what I planned. There's a couple aspects in it I like, and I'm going to hang on to those, but I need to like go down another path with this. And you need to be kind to yourself when you have moments like that. A lot of people go through it. You're not alone when you feel that way. That's probably some of the biggest stuff is be kind to yourself, be patient with yourself, and try new things. Even if you are a little unsure, I'm in the middle of, and I have to finish it tonight. Are you familiar with the NYC Midnight Challenges?
No.
They're competitions and they have a whole slew of them. There's one for short stories, there's one for flash fiction, there's one for microfiction. I'm doing the microfiction one right now. And what you do is once you sign up, you get put into a cohort. And for this particular one, for the microfiction, I've made it to the final round. It started
Nice.
with I'm very excited. It started with about 5,400 writers and it's down to the 125. So, but what they give you is at midnight on a Friday, you are assigned a genre. In some cases, it's a setting. In some cases, it's an action that has to take place in the story and a word that has to appear there. And then you have 24 hours to write a 250 word story.
No pressure.
No pressure. The first time I did one of them, I was like, what was I thinking when I did this? But I found they are so much fun. They have the flash fiction one is like 1,000 word story. They have a 250 word microfiction and a 100 word microfiction one, which is wild. But I have really enjoyed it. It has taught me to take a little bit of a chance. I got assigned, one of my assignments was political satire. And I've discovered that political satire is not my jam. But
It's always a good thing to discover.
Yeah, but I got something done. I think the thing I turned in was probably more lukewarm political comedy is probably what it was as opposed to satire. But when I was done, I was like, you know what? It wasn't perfect, but I did it. And I would have never probably ever tried to write anything in political satire if I hadn't gotten this assignment. And I really enjoyed doing them because between the time pressure, the not knowing what genre you're going to get, kind of crossing your fingers, because I've been assigned everything from horror to ghost stories to fantasy to action adventure. And in some of them, you really have to think about the words you choose when you've only got 250 words to work with.
Oh, God, yes. That is awesome. It's also a great way to challenge yourself and how you see your storytelling. So that is very exciting.
Yeah, I would absolutely recommend it to everyone. In fact, I talked one of my girlfriends who's also a writer into doing it. And I said that it was slightly longer. It was the 1,000 word event. And I said to her, I said, you're going to get your assignment. You're going to start working. I said, and for that one, you get 2 days. You have 48 hours to do it. I said, at about hour 24, I said, you're going to call me some terrible names for getting you involved in this. I said, but when you're done, I'm like, you're going to have this feeling of like accomplishment that you got it done. And she did. She emailed me like noontime on the Sunday. And she was like, I hate you. She's like, I don't know why I let you talk me into this. But at the end, she was like, I'm really happy with my story. She's like, I don't usually do, because I think she had sci-fi and she's not really into sci-fi. And she was like, holy cow, I got it done. And it was actually fun. She was like, once I got done calling you names, I realized it was fun. Well, I kind of told you would, but so it's definitely, they can be stressful. But the other thing it has taught me has been about how I approach writing to a deadline. A lot of what I will do is like, I stayed up until midnight last night, which is well past my bedtime these days, because I wanted to get my assignment. And then I just slept on it and let my subconscious kind of do whatever it was going to do. And when I woke up this morning, I had a couple ideas. So I've written down the ideas, the 2 different concepts. And tonight I will go in and like actually write the little story. But it's been very interesting because the couple times that I waited until the morning, I felt it was a lot more pressure because I didn't know until that morning. And then, because of course you have all these adulting things you have to do. You can't spend the entire Saturday writing as much as you'd like to sometimes.
It's the sad part about adulting because there's some things you're like, I wish I was doing something else. So I need to go back to something you said that I think
Yes.
as writers, I think we forget. We stop making it fun. We make it a job.
Yes. Yeah.
We add the same adulting pressures to our art as we do to the rest of our life.
Mhm.
And then we wonder why we are stressed, we're overwhelmed in this
Yes.
process that
Mhm.
is bringing to life these beautiful characters
Yep.
becomes painful.
Yes.
So
And I did, if I can interrupt you for 1 second, you just reminded me when you were talking about advice, I saw once, and if people want to write a book and get it published, and if their goal is to be on the bestseller list, then rock on. I hope you achieve your dreams. But I think people also need to remember that you don't necessarily have to monetize your joy. Someone told me that once, and I was like, oh, you're right. I can still write this. And if I want to give it away for free, I can.
it doesn't have to come with a
I
title.
don't have to get an agent. I don't have to get published. I can put it in a big 3-ring binder and give it to my best friend. And if they're the only person who reads it, that's okay.
It is also the fact that we tend to want to monetize everything we're good at. One of my girlfriends tells me all the times, then we run out of things that we use to relax because it becomes the things that we use to make money. So
Right.
then we find ourselves spiraling into these burnout sessions because there's nothing for us to just to go, I'm going to go unwind. Oh, I can't unwind because that's what I have to do for work.
Right.
So, I love it. I'm loving the fact that you have found that happiness in writing and learning about your craft and competing and being like, oh no, writing is still fun. So thank you. Love it. So, sweetie, tell us, where can our listeners find you, where they can learn more about the books, more about you? What do you have available?
Sure. I do have a website, which is www.susankhamilton.com. You can find me on Facebook. It is the / Hamilton Susan K in that instance. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Real SK Hamilton. I'll be the first one to confess I'm not so good at Instagram. I'm trying to learn it, but I try.
They're all a work in progress. I'm going to have to be the first one to admit it. It all comes with the territory. So it's all good. All right, sweetie, before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes.
Easy peasy. You have done this before. Don't think too much about these. Let's go. Home meals or restaurant meals?
Home.
Nice. You have to think about it for a minute, but okay.
Because there's a couple restaurants that if you had said this restaurant, I would have said, oh, yes. But generally speaking, home.
Okay, good. Caffeinated or decaf?
Caffeinated, and it's soda more than coffee for me.
Good to know. Thin crust or stuffed pizzas?
Thin crust.
Nice. Comedy or scary movies?
Oh, comedy all the way. All the way.
Okay. So switching a little gear, let's see how you do with this one. If you were in a deserted island and could only have 3 things, what will you take?
Books,
Nice.
my iPod, and I'm going to say my husband.
I'm glad how he's number 3 on the list. But I won't tell him. We're going to keep that quiet. I was like, I had 3. You were the last one left over. I guess I'll take you. It's all good. Which is going to be like, yeah, she meant to put you first. I swear, she meant to do that. Miss Susan, do you have any closing remarks for us?
No, just thank you for having me on. I always enjoy our conversations. It's so much fun to talk with you, and I love sharing books and thinking about the questions you have.
Awesome. And you're always so generous with your information. So to our listeners, go ahead, go find the fabulous Miss Susan. Go find any of her books. You get a selection. You can go fantasy or non-fantasy. Do you have something to pick from anything, madam? Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Celebration for you. And my dear listeners, go ahead, give this podcast a like, review it, send it to all of your friends. Tell us to join us. We're always better when we're growing together. Always remember, if you are interested in joining the podcast community and help to maintain these programs coming, go ahead, become a podcast junkie and join us. I will be back next week with another amazing author. Bye, everyone.